Anuradha, welcome. It's great to have you here. How are you doing?
Doing well, Vinod. Great to be here. Thanks for reaching
Yeah,
out.
awesome. Great. I think for people who don't know you, can you just give a brief introduction?
Oh, excuse me. Yes. Hi. Anuradha Pandey. I'm in tech consulting, professionally speaking, but I also, I guess, have a amateur writing career, and I like to think about why we are how we are and how we tend to deceive ourselves as humans. So that's been perhaps my overarching animated question is because I used to deceive myself a lot. And so over the course of several years, I had to deprogram myself and sort of throw out everything I believed prior to that. So I think you found me through one of those many essays I wrote about the things that I had to stop believing to find reality.
Yeah, excellent. I think I must set the context for the audience too. I love writing myself, but I just chanced upon your article on Twitter, which somebody had quoted, and then I just read through
It's
the
funny.
first paragraph and the second, and I was like, who's this person who's written such a compelling, authoritative, wonderful essay that I've come across in a very, very long time?
That's very kind.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I just made it. It's a compliment because it was so wonderfully written. And then I searched about your name, and then that's how this happened. So great, good to have you. So I'm going to jump
Yeah.
right. I'm going to jump right in to the context. I'll let you set the context on the blog and other stuff. But yeah, so essentially, you wrote a wonderful piece about the male gaze, and you also brought in feminists, how women perceive it, and there was a lot of context around, uh, let's say, a little bit of feminism, patriarchy, how men judge women and how women judge themselves and the men and how they take it, etc. So, to start off, what do you define as a male gaze?
Okay. So this is a concept that first appeared in US sort of gender studies contexts. The idea, and it was very limited to the cinematic male gaze. So the idea that the in classic Hollywood cinema, the camera angles and the way the woman is presented is intended to make her a sexual object of a man or like in a man's fantasy, right? So this concept of the cinematic male gaze escaped that very that really narrow context and became a feminist concept that referred to any attention that a man might give a woman in any capacity versus that very bounded definition of what the gaze might be. So the idea is if a man like a man is always looking at you. Some man is always looking at you. And the way he's looking at you is potentially violent or problematic or whatever. Versus, a man might just be looking at you and glancing and like maybe not sexualizing, right? Not necessarily objectifying you. We all look at each other as human beings when we pass each other. So sort of my question was, why are women framing it this way all the time, no matter what? I also thought very much about like my experience of India and Indian culture, right? Because I live in the US. I was raised in the US. However, I've spent enough time in India and enough time away from my extended family while in India that I have some separate experience of it. And then the other question was, how does male attention dictate where women fall on the hierarchy among ourselves, right? Because we all place ourselves according to the attention we get from the opposite sex. Sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's kind of it.
interesting. So you mentioned one point about how you, I mean, was the word rate yourself or rank ourselves among the
Yeah,
female hierarchy? Like, what do you mean by
yeah.
that?
Yeah, so women, okay. Women like men have a hierarchy, right? But that psychologically speaking, we must pretend that hierarchy does not exist. And
Hmm.
this serves a specific psychological purpose, which is you don't historically women competition openly was dangerous for us, right? We don't physically compete like men do with each other. We compete among ourselves, like among women, we compete in terms of social status, right? So the type of the attention you get from a man, and specifically the type of man who gives you attention, is a factor in your social standing among women. At the same time, we as feminists have been taught to be disgusted by such attention, right? So there's an inner conflict happening whereby we use it to place ourselves in a hierarchy, right? And that means it would mean attention from a high status man is the thing that qualifies you to place yourself higher. But any attention from any man is a signal to a woman of what the value of that other, of what her value is and what her value is relative to the women around her. So even if you get attention from men that your friends say are unattractive, they still, that is still a signal in their mind about your worth as a woman to the men around you. So let me give you a
Mhm.
story from
Mhm.
college. I was a late bloomer in just in general. I got attention as a 18-year-old in my first year of college from men that were deemed undesirable by the female friends around me. They mocked me for this, even though I had no, I don't know,
Mhm.
I didn't like particularly try to attract these particular people's attention. They mocked me for this. And I kept wondering, why did they mock me for it? And it's because any attention I got is a signal to them that I am worth paying attention to. Thereby, I'm a competition. Thereby, they
Ah.
must neutralize me, right? But they also don't realize they're doing this consciously. This is not a calculated thing. This is just how women behave.
This is extremely fascinating. I mean, I get a sense that you've done quite a bit of evolutionary psychology research as well. So, I think it might help to explain audience what the evolutionary reasons are behind how women
Yeah,
compete for attention and how they possibly resort to slander and denigration when
yeah.
such attention comes from the wrong person or from the right person. Would you care to explain a
Yes.
bit more? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is going to be there are a few facets to this. One, a lot of people, evolutionary psychology and biology are difficult to name a science like we might name, say, biology as a science. And this is because you can't go back in time and create any control conditions to actually test your hypothesis. So I will just caveat this with that. At the same time, there are respected psychologists who have done work in this area in academic settings. And having looked into that research, whether it be papers or books, some themes emerge, which is women compete covertly, men compete overtly. Men compete with each other by physically fighting and then placing yourselves on a hierarchy based on physical strength. It's very obvious who is where. Women compete covertly specifically because one, we cannot afford to physically fight because, well, we are at a physical strength disadvantage. Two, we needed to raise children cooperatively in groups when we were hunter-gatherers in the pre-agrarian age. Thereby, that required certain competitive strategies for men and women that diverged because of our unique needs of survival. And there's actually a book called Warriors and Warriors that goes through a lot of research on these topics, specifically male and female competition and how it emerged from our specific survival needs. So women compete covertly. Women also have evolved to deny that to act as though there is no difference between us. And you see this actually, so that the psychologist Joyce Benenson, who wrote that book Warriors and Warriors, mentioned, and this clicked everything into place for me, that from an early age, girls know not to outshine the the girls around them. If they do better than their friends at school or like socially, they know that their friends will abandon them. And this, of course, has generally been true for me in my life. I've experienced a lot of competition, like competition from girls that they then deny was happening in the first place. Because I don't do this thing where I pretend as though everyone around me is equal to me. And that, of course, that is a horrible, like that's a taboo thing for a woman to do with regard to the women around her. You pretend as though everyone is equally intelligent and equally beautiful, even though you all know that that's not true. And this has some other purposes too. One, if you pretend as though your ugly friend is just as attractive, you are making her delusional essentially about the type of man she can attract, which she
Yeah.
will then not attract a man at all who is at her level and thereby not reproduce, right?
Right.
And you're smiling because you know I then thereby you've seen this happen, right?
Yeah.
And then and then separately, if a woman thinks that she is equally intelligent as you, she doesn't see you as a threat to her rise. But then also separately, if she just sits there resting on her laurels thinking, I'm equally intelligent as all these other women, eventually some woman is going to pull away from her and start doing better, and she won't have time to catch up. And so we must pretend as though we are all the same, even while everyone knows we are not all the same. And this is crazy making to me because I know we're not all the same, and I have never been willing to pretend we are all the same. And so you can imagine that doesn't make me a lot of friends. And then separately, so mothers and daughters, this is actually another thing that I've been wondering about, and there is some research that indicates that this is a thing. A mother may also treat her daughter badly if she sees her as potential competition or sees her as potentially doing better in life than the mother was able to do. And this is another thing that has dogged me my entire life that perhaps sent me in this direction of being unwilling to pretend, which is that my mother and grandmother were the primary upholders of patriarchy in my family. Not the men, it was the women. And this is again, this is something that we are not allowed to talk about because we want to believe that women are innocent victims of male whatever fuckery.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? We want to act as though women don't have any agency and we are always oppressed and we don't make choices. Whereas in Indian families, some of the worst upholders of patriarchy are actually the women, which is why I appreciate that I'm talking to you about this because you're actually in India. And a lot of the time when Indian American women are having this conversation, they don't have like a significant experience of the actual India to be able to draw upon when they talk about how Indian men are like horribly patriarchal, blah, blah, blah.
Right, right. I have one follow-up question to what you
Yeah.
explained about the competition, particularly, let's say, in the teens, which typically it starts around that time frame.
Yeah.
So coming from a evolutionary psychology and let's say evolution standpoint on the, let's say, the competition to find the best mate possible for her to reproduce, you mentioned two factors of competition. One is intelligence and the second one is beauty. Which do you think takes a higher precedence over there?
Oh, I love this question. I think it is beauty for men if you actually think about that, right? Because you all are more visually oriented creatures. While a baseline of intellect is required, you're not going to make a choice based on intellect, right? You're going to make a choice based on beauty. And then you're also going to choose, perhaps, based on who you expect will be the most supportive of your own rise in the world, because that is a thing that men want also, understandably so. So who's going to actually help get you there? Because I think the modern man understands that he needs a woman to he can't just do it himself. It's just not going to happen yourself, right? We need each other. I have supported my fiance. He has also supported me, and we have both done very well as a result of having each other's support.
Got it. Cool. I think this is very fascinating the way we have established the framework. So I just want to understand from a woman's perspective what women accept as an acceptable gaze.
Oh, okay. So what they will say they accept as a gaze is they won't accept it, right? So here, okay. So in America, the average white woman or the average, say, Indian American woman, and by the way, for your audience, an Indian American woman in the United States is indistinguishable from a white woman in terms of class status, in terms of the way we speak, in terms of the way we act. We are indistinguishable. So think of us as white women.
Mm-hmm.
So say a middle class or above white woman or just woman in general probably wants a high status man to look at her. But she will not say this out loud because it is unfeminist to say this, to say that you want any male attention at all, because especially you must indicate to the less desirable women that you don't want it. Thereby, they will also learn to reject it, thereby dampening
Hmm.
their own prospects. But you are not also consciously doing that. That's another important thing to note, is that you may not even be aware of the fact that you're doing this. Now, a woman can discern a high status man from mostly just appearance. So here's an example. My fiance doesn't usually wear suits. He was walking around in a dirty jacket in New York for like 3 days. He went shopping and got a suit just because he wanted to, and he noticed that suddenly women were looking at him.
Yeah.
Now, it was really just a change in clothes. He did not significantly groom or change his appearance. He just changed his clothes. So the way a woman evaluates whether or not she wants a certain man's attention is based on her own evaluation of him that happened already, right? So the man's attention becomes desirable or undesirable based on what a woman can ascertain about his status.
Okay, that's interesting, right? So based on the status of the men who gives attention to her, she's okay with it or not okay with it, right?
Yeah.
That's what essentially it boils down to, and which is kind of aligning with the broad trends that honest women actually talk about, right? Like you. Um, so what I'm trying to get at is when you say status, what attributes of the status are you relating to? Is it
Oh,
looks? Is it money? Is it gait? Is it personality? There must be a few factors that women typically look at men
yeah.
for, and which are like hundreds of more factors than what men typically
Yeah.
look at as a woman, right? Can you
Yeah.
elaborate? Yeah.
I think personality is probably more important to a woman than looks. I think men get away with a wider variety of looks than women get away with regard to male taste. I think women are therefore rated more harshly on their looks as a result. This is something that must be admitted. We must admit that this happens
Yeah.
because if men are more visually oriented, it stands to reason that they would be harsher on women and divide them more based on their looks. Whereas a woman is looking at his material status because, well, of course, historically we have needed to ask what kind of man can support our children. Thereby, material status signals are even more important for a woman than are physical looks of a man. A man can get away with all sorts of things looks wise if he projects the correct socioeconomic status.
Okay. So can I then frame it in such a way that while I understand that the looks of a man is not as important as it is important for a man, the woman's looks, right? What does it actually play a part? Because I mean, I believe that it kind of gets the foot in the door, right? I mean, you can't really be a
Yeah,
very ugly looking man and expect to land
no.
a beautiful girl. I don't think that works.
Yes, that's accurate. Yes. So there is a hierarchy. So at a certain point, there's a cutoff. There is a cutoff of the status of man who can look at, right, a woman. Like you're not going to date up. Men are not going to date up. Women are going to date up, but men are
Yeah.
not. And so men also do the lower status men also do this thing where they try to cut down the higher status women who won't give them attention. And you see this in the incel rhetoric on the internet, like that is lower status men being angry that they can't get a certain status of woman. But at the same time, the lower status woman is also trying to compete with the higher status woman and cut her down. And then the higher status woman is also competing and trying to get rid of her rivals at the bottom of the hierarchy. But the way these competitive instincts are expressed, of course, are different. So a lower stat like a woman might call another woman a pick me girl to neutralize her competition, but an incel is going to neutralize a higher status woman differently than a woman would another woman. So there's
Okay.
that. And then I guess if I think about how I evaluated men when I was younger, I was weird and I didn't really understand these things before, but you're right. Like if I consider how I evaluated, there was a baseline of physical attractiveness, like below which I would not consider like any man. But also, this is predicated upon you knowing where you stand in the hierarchy yourself. which a lot of people just don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point. I was probably coming to that. But before that, I want to you would explain what do you mean by pick me girl? What does that stand for?
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, is this not a thing you guys have in India? Okay, okay.
I mean, I
Um,
think the term is
maybe.
quite, maybe it's popular. I don't know much about it.
I don't know, like maybe it's not part of the internet parlance of India. I don't know. I don't know. But a pick me girl is an insult deployed by a woman toward another woman. And this is why this is related to the male gaze in that the insult is basically you're saying that this woman really is just acting in such a way to get male attention and she doesn't
Ah,
actually mean what she's saying or doing. So I get called a pick me girl because I write positively about men,
ah,
you see. So the assumption is I am pandering to men rather than truly believing what I believe, you see. So
okay.
yeah, so
Awesome.
that's what
So
they do to neutralize the competition.
got it. So if anyone writes, if particularly if a girl writes, let's say, against patriarchy or supporting some angle of, let's say, the men or slightly against the feminist narrative, then you're likely to be qualified as
Yes.
a pick me. Okay.
That is one situation. And then separately, if you are trying to just get male attention openly,
Uh,
that is another avenue that opens you to pick me girl. It actually began as an attention thing, but now it's become an ideological policing thing. So if you step out of the feminist approved script, you open yourself up to charges of being a pick me girl.
that's interesting. Okay. I think fundamentally, I think we are boiling down to one very important word, which I think is probably the currency with which women typically rate themselves on the, let's say, attraction hierarchy, as we say. I mean, you mentioned about you deciding where you stand in the women's, let's say, beauty or status hierarchy, right? I mean, before you
Mhm.
figured what kind of man you could probably attract, right?
Yeah.
So specifically, and you also mentioned in your blog that you've spoken to a lot of women around this, which I'll come to in a bit. Why is attention so important to women?
Oh, I love this question. So because attention is the currency of our social standing. There is no social standing for a woman outside of it's almost like the qualification criteria of where you stand. If you don't have an external signal of where you stand, how are you going to place yourself? We are not allowed to openly place ourselves, right? Women are not socially allowed to openly compete. Thereby, how do you know where you fall? You then have to externalize the source of competition toward external approval. And this is why women are uniquely susceptible to social media addiction because it hijacks our status drive. And the status drive is primarily the currency in our status sorting is attention, specifically male attention.
And from the high status men that you
Yeah.
desire.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so this is where a feminist woman might decry the male gaze, but then she will also be posting selfies on Instagram to get anonymous male attention.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's obviously right. There's a clear hypocrisy or a dichotomy there, which
Yes.
we clearly understand the
Yes.
feminist narratives. So I think you mentioned about a very interesting article about the piece that came in a UK blog. I think Laura Mulvey's work specifically,
Oh
right?
yeah.
I think you,
Yeah, that was a scientific paper or
yeah.
scientific paper. I don't know. I don't count it as scientific because it was about the male gaze at the gym. So actually, a more interesting case study is in the
Mhm.
US, you have women going to gyms. And so this is what is exploring. This is my interpretation. Women go to gyms in small clothes. And then they're filming themselves for social media attention. Now, the men physically standing there are also giving them attention, but they are upset about this attention because they can tell it's being given to them. And it may not be from the type of man that they consider high enough status, whereby they will be okay with men giving them anonymous attention on Instagram as a result of that same content that they have filmed at the gym.
So this part is a little confusing to me, Anu. I mean, in
Yeah.
gym, typically you're going to probably the chance of you finding very low status men is probably not as common.
Yes, that's true.
Um, so why is it that it upsets them? Because you pretty much you conceive that you're going to go in, let's say, shorter, tighter clothes or
Yeah.
pajamas, which are kind of attractive enough, and men can't really control themselves when they look at attractive women, right? That's how we are
Yep.
wired, to be honest.
Yep. Yep.
And then when the same men look at you because you dressed yourself in a way that you can be looked at, why does it become a big issue for them then in the gym?
Because I my theory is here is that the feminist paradigm has made it not okay to desire attention and then to receive it. And then separately, the idea that we are not allowed to openly compete makes us ashamed of receiving attention in the first place because there's a reflex. That's my theory. I can't prove this because this is a hard thing to study. How are you going to study it? But feminism when I was a child taught me that male attention was dangerous, and it was always dangerous, and it was always indicative of your safety being threatened.
Yeah, you did write about that with reference to Scott Galloway and what your mom and grandmother taught you as growing up as a kid, and then you changed your
Yeah.
mind over time. So, what was actually told to you, let's say, as an Indian American who grew up, versus what you realized, and what time frame or what made you change your views on these things?
Okay. I was raised in a rather unusual household in that most Indian Americans have degrees who are here. Highly educated population, just in general, and high status, materially speaking. My parents were not highly educated. My dad didn't graduate high school, and we didn't have money. So the way the way they thought of male violence was very class coded. So violent alcoholic men in my both my parents came from poor families in India. So my mother's side had very violent alcoholic men. I also, am fairly certain my mother was abused within her own family, and this happens a lot in Indian families, and no one talks about it. Um, so her view was very much coming from a protective place, which I understand. And then separately, when I would go to India, I would feel deeply unsafe because you walk around on the street and men stare at you. It's just a fact. It may not be all the men around staring at you, but like you could walk down the street and feel deeply unsafe. Um, and I've traveled through UP by myself, did not feel very safe. So I understand why they did that. I actually started to see American feminism as freedom from Indian patriarchy, specifically patriarchy enforced by the women in my family. Weirdly enough, started to see this as an escape because I saw that the white girls that were my friends were very liberated. Their mothers didn't police their clothing. They didn't tell them what to do. I wasn't allowed to be friends with boys, which, as you can imagine, socially fucked with me a little bit. So I saw feminism as freedom, right? And then in college, I am still adhering to this feminist paradigm because I saw it again as freedom from Indian patriarchy. And a lot of my Indian American female friends also suffered under this same set of social norms whereby they would be policed, and it was actually truly oppressive. And so I thought, okay, I will seize my liberation and I will not act according to these highly conservative Indian norms. And I didn't. I did whatever I wanted in my 20s, literally anything I wanted. And of course, that didn't turn out to be a recipe for life success. You
Mhm.
can't just do whatever you want. And this is actually something Western feminism teaches women. And then when I say this, people think I'm crazy. People think I'm the one getting something from feminism that wasn't there. But if now it is very clear that feminism is anti-discipline, and it does not lead to letting go of discipline entirely does not lead to great life outcomes for a lot of women.
I think you
So a
should
lot of
repeat
women who
that.
just
We should frame the
okay,
sentence.
yes, we
Yeah.
should. We should because discipline is an entirely demonized concept in the modern Western frame of the liberated individual. So feminism as it exists in this age in 2025 is about doing what you want and exercising your choices. The inherent exercise of your choices is empowering,
Yeah, yeah.
supposed to be empowering, right? And so the key is though, doing whatever you want is not does not lead to a satisfying life, just in general. Plato, just going all the way back, right? Or going to the Gita, it just as a relatable example, you are told that, or like the lesson you should take away is that you shouldn't just let your emotions carry you and do whatever you want. Like that's not the key to an ethical life. That takes you away from an ethical life. It's not, it's difficult to actually behave in a morally upright manner if you are simply doing what your emotions want, like what you want to do at any given moment. So this is something that afflicts women quite a bit, is we have been told that liberation means doing whatever you want, whether it be sexually speaking or socially or whatever, it doesn't matter. So, and sexual liberation is, of course, a big part of this. Doing whatever you want in that arena, that's
Yeah.
framed as the ultimate empowerment. And I have found, of course, that that's not true. That is a recipe for seeking validation externally, where you should be trying to seek it internally and building a self that can withstand attention being withdrawn by other people.
Interesting. I think, do you, the way you explain escaping from the clutches of patriarchy in India to, let's say, the liberation, which is kind of pandered to by the feminists in the US, and then realizing that that's not actually going to be a great recipe for a good life, I think it's very interesting. Do you actually think the current form of feminism has failed or misled women to some extent?
Yes, I think that it has taught us that every choice we exercise is a good choice. And of course, that's not true. It has, in trying to empower us in this way, it has actually disempowered us. Doing whatever you want isn't actually a recipe for empowerment, because you can't create the conditions for a flourishing life. You need some discipline, and feminists will argue with me about this. But the biggest psychological operation from the second wave period onward, especially, was that exercising whatever choice you want at any given moment is liberation. That then led us to put dis and we have an undisciplined society in general, right? The internet is a big reason for this. But even in general, we have been discipline has eroded with every passing year of humanity existing. But if we think about the constraints that create a good life, and then the fact that achieving mastery in something, it doesn't have to be a career thing, in
Mm-hmm.
anything,
Yeah.
that leads to a strong internal self-concept because you've done something difficult. Feminism was squarely in the way of me doing difficult things. I wouldn't be writing and I wouldn't have any kind of professional success if I hadn't left it behind and developed discipline, which is something a lot of my friends struggle to do.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I think this has been one of the most interesting, profound discussions I've had in a
Oh,
very
well, thank
long
you.
time. I mean, I really
Same.
mean it. It's been
I appreciate
fascinating.
that.
I think there's more to do, Anu. I think we're running short of time for our
Definitely.
first session. So I'm going to cover the core gender dynamics, the societal and
Yeah.
psychological impacts, and a little more into the liberalization of the West since 1960s,
Yeah.
wave one. So I think
Yeah.
we're
And
going to
I
lot
want to
more
talk
about.
about what the Indian liberalization process has also done for
Yeah.
women in India. That's a fascinating idea. Like, but yeah, sorry, we don't have necessarily time to discuss all of that, but it is a topic that we
No, no,
should
we
pick up
should.
again.
We'll do it in session two or session three because I actually
Mhm.
think that you're one of the, let's say, what's the right word? Most original thinkers
Oh, thank you.
with a bit of spine and a lot of knowledge. So I think
Really appreciate
I-
that.
I'm really impressed and I'm also honored to be talking to you. I feel that way.
Thank
So
you.
it's
Yes,
been great. And
likewise.
by the way, if you live in Austin, you should read. You would have read about David Buss, UT Austin.
Who?
David Buss. He's written a lot
No,
on the topics that we
actually.
talk about. Yeah, I'll send you
Oh,
the
no,
link.
I'm not familiar. Please do.
I WhatsApp you. I think I
Yeah,
tried to meet
please
him
do.
2 months back when I was in Austin, but I couldn't.
Oh, fun.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, I missed you. Okay, well, next time.
yeah. No, we'll catch up. I think I'll schedule one more call.
Yeah.
Anu, thanks a lot. You have a great
Thank you.
weekend.
You
Fantastic
too.
talking to you.
Thanks for
Cheers.
having me. Yeah, take care.
Bye.
All right, bye.